In the Fuzzy Memories podcast, we celebrate the good, the rad, and the fugly of the 80s and 90s.
We're three latchkey kids who made it out alive.
And in each episode, we break down all the culture that popped, 1 year at a time.
Whether it's the birth of legends...
I'm Lyme disease free today, and I have Whitney Houston and MTV to thank. Or audacious moves.
Imagine also the poor Golden Gate Bridge. You turn 75 and people have a party on you.
Yep. I don't want that.
Or even confusing PSAs.
And the stop, drop, and roll. I mean, I assumed
Yes.
as an adult I would catch on fire weekly.
All the time!
We've got a take that will make you laugh.
We've also got thoughts on all sorts of random phenomena and the most unmitigated of golf.
Why sharks can't be trusted, people can't be trusted, and rivers can't be trusted. It's collusion.
Of the highest degree.
Uh-huh.
You were counseling me to start my remarks with, first of all, bitch.
Everyone in that room would have snapped to attention.
It's going to be basically coffee lids, shark revenge, and then maybe like Matt Getz. God, we need to do something about him.
Join us every other Wednesday to celebrate the hits, the misses, and the misfits of the weirdest decades.
If I could tell my 14-year-old self from 1990 that I would be eating in a Cheesecake Factory in
Beverly Hills.
I'd be like, we did it. We did it, Joe.
We did it.
Listen and subscribe to Fuzzy Memories on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and your favorite podcast platform.
Hello and welcome to Broads and Books. I'm Amy.
And I'm Erin, and this is a special Broads and Books bonus episode.
Today on the Broads Talk Books with, we've got Lauren Marino, author of Bookish Broads.
We recommended her book and also just love the kismet here.
Broads. Just talking
Books.
about broads.
Broads, books, bookish broads.
Yes, it was meant to be.
It was. And we talked about what it means to be a broad, how book editing affects her reading, her love of Dolly Parton, which
That was,
Come
we
on.
can talk about that for a long
Come
time.
on.
Yeah.
and what she's looking forward to in pop culture with quarantine past us.
We put all the books and other things Lauren mentions in the show notes so you can add them all to your TBR pile.
And now here's our interview with Lauren Marino.
First off, I want to congratulate you on an excellent name for the book.
Well,
We
how
love
great
it.
is that? Yes. I mean, I love it. I came up with this and then I found your podcast and it was so exciting. I said, we obviously all, think alike. Broads and books, bookish broads. You
Yes.
are the epitome of bookish broads.
And broads is such a great descriptor
Right.
for the kind of women that we like.
Right.
Yeah.
'Cause Originally, when I first wrote the proposal for this to give to my agent, I called it Bookish Broads and Literary Ladies. And he was like, you know what? Let's just get rid of the literary ladies. It sounded a little too prim, bookish. So I was like, you know what? You're right. Bookish broads. And they all, even though they might appear prim and proper, like literary ladies on the outside, if you're a female writer, you are a broad on the
Yes, you
inside.
are.
Yes. Yes.
Because you have to be brave and you have to be courageous and mouthy and ahead of your time and not really care what other people think too much, or else you would never be able to get your words on the page. You'd be
Absolutely.
embarrassed. So.
And to do something that people are not asking for and sometimes actively telling you not to do, you have to be a broad. Yes.
Totally
Agreed.
Thinking about you as a young person, a kid or a teen,
Yep.
do you remember specific books that spoke to you particularly?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was always reading. I was always obsessed with books. I was that kid. My mom would read to me before I went to sleep and before I could read, as we do. And, I couldn't read yet, but I would just I'd read the same story over and over again. I just memorized the books. So I could just recite the books, which I think a lot of kids do. And I'm sure there's all sorts of educational studies about how that makes you school ready or whatever. But my mom was a member of the Book of the Month Club, and I was so hungry for books that I would just pull, like by the time I was 10, I was pulling books off of her bookshelf and reading books that were probably wildly inappropriate, but that I didn't even know were inappropriate because I was so naive, like it just went totally over my head. But, in my own age group, I loved The Secret Garden. I loved A Little Princess. There was just something about those stories about these girls and hardship and overcoming it and finding ways to be in the world. And the last of the really great Wang Doodles I was obsessed with, which I don't even like that. Julie Andrews wrote that book, but at the time I didn't even know it. And it's a children's book, and it's like a fantastical tale. And I just loved it, full of imagination. But then as I got a little older, it was Jane Eyre. I probably read Jane Eyre when I always think it was like 10 when I just started reading all of these books that were probably way too advanced for me. But like between 10 and 12, of course, Little Women, I read Little Women and loved it because we all read it and wanted to be Jo. We all thought we were Jo.
Talk about a broad. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. And then like learning about like studying in depth Louisa May Alcott for Bookish Broads to see how we saw it in the most recent version of the movie, like movie version number 7, but the fact that there was no marriage in the original story, and that the publisher said, but the woman has to get married at the end of the book. And Louisa May Alcott never got married herself. So it's like, roles of anyway, I always wanted to be Jo, and I always wanted to move to New York and be a writer just like she did. And, that's pretty much what I did, but it was a long road. And then, and Jane Eyre was, just Jane, plain underdog. And she stood up for herself despite everything, and ran away from home and just really was just solid in who she was, and brave enough to just follow her heart, no matter, regardless of poverty and having, refusing to be the mistress and, ending up being the stronger character. Like I just think I always went towards strong female characters, which I think is true of young women. And, back then it was sort of a different world. Things have changed dramatically. I'm not that old, but it was still a very different time.
But one of the other things that we have talked about on the podcast, or people sometimes bring up to us, is that at some point in their reading life, there might have been a little stumbling block when they were either forced to read something or they struggled with something that was called a classic. We've talked a lot about ours being Moby Dick. Is there a classic you remember struggling with?
Beowulf. When it's in Old English, I think that's a bit of a struggle, a challenge.
It's a bit of a struggle.
Yeah,
for sure. It sounds like you took on some classics at a pretty early age and really got into it. Yeah, as long as they.
The thing is, I read a lot of classics when I was younger. I was always a voracious reader. I was a geek, a book geek for sure. And I was in AP English in high school, and so whatever we read, I had probably read already. I would say like even maybe Fahrenheit 451 or Animal Farm or 1984 were not my favorites. I like Fahrenheit 451 because of the whole book burning thing, but I'm not really a science fiction or politically, I love satire, but I think maybe Animal Farm in 1984 were a little over my head, and
it's a lot to ask of young kids.
Yeah,
that stuff. Yeah, it is very involved.
But that was probably high school. But then in college, I was an English major. I did study 20th century literature my senior year. And a lot of those books, I mean, I would say almost all of the books in my 20th century literature course were written by men. And in other courses, I read Flannery O'Connor and Eudora Welty and Willa Cather. And I can't even remember what those electives were. I chose specifically electives that had female writers in them. It was not easy to find. And the 20th century literature, it was Joseph Heller, it was Ernest Hemingway, it was John Dos Passos, it was Steinbeck. And I'm just not in love with all those guys. Just never was. And they don't speak to me. Even Hemingway, I mean, there are a couple short stories of his, like The Hills Like White Elephants, that I absolutely love. But like, as far as reading their novels, it's just not there for me. And it's probably either too macho or it's about war. And I don't want to read about war unless it was the Civil War. And, I just think, I am a woman. I always want strong female characters and female perspective. So those more macho guy books just, don't do it for me.
For sure. Do you think that, the strong female characters or any other books that you read when you were younger, do you remember reading any of them and thinking, this is what I want to do? I want to be a writer.
Well, certainly Jo in Little Women. But I mean, I'm the one that at 10 thought I could be a professional children's writer and sent away to go join this thing, and they sent me a very nice note back. Like, maybe why don't you wait till you're 18? Why don't you wait till you're a grown up? But I think I just always had that. I always wanted to be a writer, or I always was a writer. Like, I have journals and journals and journals from every period of my life. And I've always, even when I was walking to school in grammar school, it sounds like narcissism run amok, but really I like to look at it that it was more of a creative mindset, like you're kind of born with. But I would be walking to school and the birds are, it's like boring. It's just walking to school on the suburban sidewalks of New Jersey. But I imagine there was a voice or a camera or a voice omniscient over me in the clouds that was narrating the story of me walking to school, even though nothing interesting was really happening, but focusing on the various details. And so it's just I always thought I was just a weirdo, but as I've talked to other writers, and I'm lucky enough to work with writers all the time. And a lot of writers say that they did that too. It's almost like you're the outsider looking into, you're an observer. So I just think I was just born that way. Now, learning the skills to be a good writer is a whole nother story.
Oh, for sure.
And then, of course, as an adult, having to support yourself and your family. And I'm a single mom and trying to, I can't really make a living as a full-time writer. I work as a book editor and then I write my books when I can. And the times when I can sit in solitude and just immerse myself in writing are the happiest times of my life. But it's not it happens rarely. I had a summer or I had a year when I wrote a book called What Would Dolly Do, which is all about Dolly Parton. And that was a whole 6 months of just sitting there writing about Dolly Parton and researching her. And I don't think I was like, this is happiness at last. I finally found it. And it's me by myself with, Dolly Parton records and internet and interviews. And then the same thing with Bookish Broads. I sat there for 6 months and just immersing myself in all of these stories behind the storytellers, all of these women's challenges and passions. And I love research and I love writing, and it's just, but it's not my full-time job, unfortunately, because it's just not financially viable.
For most people, I think. Yeah,
definitely. Well, it sounds like, thinking about your reading life now, that you probably have a wide range that you read as an editor. Is there any books that have surprised you recently or that you really enjoyed?
Yeah, I'm sometimes because I work in publishing and I publish nonfiction, like I'm reading all the time. And so much of what I'm reading is, I'm either editing manuscripts that are in the nonfiction area, and a lot of them are, they surprise me. Sometimes they surprise me by how bad they are and how much work they do. Like, oh, why did I sign this up? And but I know from having written, I have great sympathy, empathy. I don't know. It is so hard to write that I understand everybody needs an editor. So for me to read, like, fiction is my pleasure and my special happy place, but I have to, I block out specific times several times a year when I'm not working or when my workload is less. To me, people who write fiction are like magicians. I know that they're not, because I know they work really hard at it, but it's like there's like a sixth sense. There's almost like a psychic ability or like such a deep level of sensitivity to see into human nature and to see into where we're at culturally, to be able to write about it in a beautiful, resonant way. It just kind of, it always surprises me.
Absolutely.
Especially after I've been writing and I've been working so hard at it, and then I pick up some amazing novel and I'm just like, what? Like, I will never do this. I will never be able to do that. It's just, some people are just so gifted and, it's, so that always, it doesn't surprise me because I've been reading my whole life, but I guess after writing my own things, it surprises me.
Absolutely. Well, I imagine, as you were writing Bookish Broads, that happened a lot. And, as we mentioned, we recommended it in a recent episode, and we love the synergy, you might say, between our names. When you were conceptualizing the book, when you were writing the book, do you think there were specific authors or books that inspired your process and your final book?
Well, I started, with nonfiction, you write a book proposal. So I wrote a proposal, and like these ideas sort of come to, like, I know, like they're brewing and they're percolating and I can feel them coming. But then when it finally comes to me, like, this is what it is. Oh my God, it's Bookish Broads. It's about women writers' history and how, it takes me maybe 6 months. The same thing happened with Dolly Parton. It's just like things are percolating in my mind, and then something will happen that will be an aha moment. But so with Bookish Broads, I just started writing about, like, my favorites or the obvious ones to me, or who I thought were obvious, like Charlotte Bronte and Jane Austen and Toni Morrison. And, I started with my own favorites because that was like an easy way in, and I already knew a lot about them. What was interesting was, as I kept going in, like, I had a whole list originally of about 50 female writers that I thought I was going to write about. But then as I got into the research and I started hearing about I started making the connections between how every female writer sort of built on the female writers that came before them. So then I went way back into, like, Lady Murasaki and, Tela Genji, and how that had really been the beginnings of the origins of the novel. It's like I went down the rabbit hole and I kept having magical moments while I was studying these women. And then in studying them, they would lead me to new writers. Like, I would learn through my research, she was inspired by this person and this person and this person. So I would go back into the past. What I ended up writing is completely different from the book that I originally set down to write. And a lot of the women I wanted to write about, I did not get a chance to. And I learned about a lot of writers that I had not heard of before.
What a fascinating experience that must have been.
I got a PhD in a year on my own time and got paid to do it. But I had so much fun doing it. I could spend, like, the rest of my life writing Bookish Broads #2 and Bookish Broads number 3. I mean, it's not going to happen, probably.
I mean, who's to say? Yeah.
Maybe in my old age, that's what I'll do just for kicks. But,
I feel like that's kind of what you're talking about has been kind of our journey too on the podcast, is like we talk to authors or we find this book and it leads us down a path to other books we hadn't heard of. And it's like our favorite part is discovering things that otherwise we might not have come across in any other way. Do you think that there's a book or an author that everyone should read?
I mean, I want to say Toni Morrison. I think in the United States, certainly Toni Morrison would be a person. I mean, it's hard for me to pick like one person, like one.
Well, one final question, and it's not necessarily book related, because as you may have heard, we also talk about our pop culture obsessions. We talk about the podcasts we're listening to, the movies, the shows. Do you have a current pop culture obsession?
Well, I mean, we're just coming out of the pandemic. So I think for like my obsession was that I've watched every single thing on Netflix.
So just Netflix in general.
So just Netflix, because if it's on there, I've seen it.
Okay.
Usually, like, my daughter and I watched Bridgerton I think it was over Christmas week. Like it came out on Christmas Eve or something like that was our Christmas week. We watched all of Bridgerton,
perfect,
all at once. I mean, I'm usually behind in pop culture because I'm usually ahead in what's coming with books in the future. I mean, and again, I go through phases. Like I went through my Nina Simone phase where I watched whatever happened, Miss Simone, and then I obsess and listen to Nina Simone music all the time. And then I read biographies about Nina Simone. I mean, currently, I don't like when I went through my divorce, I was obsessed with Jack White. And I listened to Blunderbuss like over and over and over again because that was his divorce album. So, and then I was like traveling like a deadhead around the country
to see Jack White.
Right? I mean,
that's a good obsession.
Like a crazy person, know, like. So, I don't know. I mean, I'm always obsessed with music of any kind and learning about new music. And my current obsession, now I'm doubly vaccinated, finally, is that live music is going to come back. Yes. I cannot wait. I am going to be at every show, everywhere. And I'm not going to be able to travel that much because I have to work, obviously. But if it's in Central Park, I'll be there. I know I'm going to New Orleans in October for Jazz Fest. And I'm just going to be there for 10 days, ignoring work and children and any other responsibilities. I'm just going to immerse myself in music for 10 days. And,
sounds amazing. And also sounds like, I think going back to live music now, after it being gone for over a year, it's going to be so much richer. And
it's like for me, live music, it's like I have epiphanies all the time. And I have it's like a spiritual religious experience for me. I mean, that's how with What Would Dolly Do? I mean, I was obsessed with Dolly Parton for 2 years of my life, and I'm still obsessed with her, but in a different kind of way, And I think the whole world has been obsessed with her for the past year. So.
Yes, very much.
Erin, I like that Lauren, right off the bat, gave us a great definition of what it means to be a broad. We are constantly trying to define what a broad is.
Yes.
And she helped us with saying, a female writer has to be a broad.
Has to be a broad.
Which I'm all for. I like that idea. Yeah.
I like to keep our definition and lines around it a little loosey-goosey.
Absolutely.
But this comes right in.
Yes.
This fits. I like it.
Loosey-goosey so that we can continue to define it as things change and morph. And okay, great. Yeah, I agree.
I like that she did what we did and read books that were way too advanced at way too early of an age.
I really felt seen.
Yes.
Yeah. I didn't I pulled some books from Mom's shelf, but also the library where you're just unsupervised. And the librarian says, yes, you can read this entire book on the Holocaust. 9-year-old, go for it.
Yeah. Do it. Why not?
I also like that Lauren wrote a book about Dolly Parton.
She sure did.
Yeah.
And I'm here for it.
Yeah.
She's a nonfiction book editor, and she talked about how she has to really parcel her fiction for certain times of year.
Which would be really tough.
It would be.
There's so many times where I'm just feeling a novel.
Yes.
And nonfiction isn't going to do it.
I know. Yeah, that would be very difficult. I've often wondered that about editors or people that are really immersed in the book, how to balance your own personal wants with your professional. That has to be very difficult.
Yeah, literary agents, book editors, it must be difficult. I like that she basically admitted like her pop culture pick was Netflix, and she finished it all.
Yeah.
And I think we can all feel that a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just
That
sums
rifled
it up.
on through.
Right.
Just
That
got it all.
It up. I love that she mentioned how much she loves live music. She's got a trip planned. She's excited this summer and fall to get out there. We were all feeling our vax selves and like, I'm going to get some live music in my system.
Do it.
Do it.
Yes. Sweaty watching live music.
Yeah, see, that's not a thing for me, but she was really excited. So
it used to be a huge thing for me. These days, I'm just it's not as great. But yeah, it was a big thing. Well, guess what? We will be back next Wednesday with our regular weekly themed episodes.
In the meantime, happy reading.
I'm up again. Same night, another dream. Before trying this recording thing, I didn't remember much of anything of these dreams. I didn't remember much from any of the women. And one night of doing this, and it's broken things open. The dreams they're in me, and they're coming out of me, and
to me, I am not broken. I am the most whole, most real.
Cause their despair. I wait for the word. Witch.
Look at the mad woman in her cage. She was a woman with holes inside her. That was the heaviest factor, the final evidence, the heart of the issue.
Somehow, you understand this. You hear me. Wherever you are, whatever this is, you...
this isn't a dream journal anymore. It's not. It's just fact. Because now this is some sort of record. What are these dreams? Maybe there's a better question. Who are these women? Weird Woman is a Broads and Books production. All 9 episodes are available January 10th. Listen and subscribe to Weird Woman on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and your favorite podcast platform. That's WYRD Woman, wherever you listen to podcasts.